the map of the 2018 Library Board meeting starting at 5 o'clock. Attendance, Scott Edwards, Don Wright, Ken Hall, Larry Osborne, Nick Dirkman, Jan Wallander, and staff Mo Cole and Denise Butcher. I'm going to first ask if there's any other changes to the agenda before we start. I'm going to make one minor change and move the discussion, the letter from Kathleen Drain from Sandy that is part of the LDAC report to the end under communication, where we would normally have their presentation around the LDAC Advisory Board representative, which is Don. So any other changes or additions to the agenda? Okay, we'll move on to approval of the minutes. We have minutes from both November and December, since we did not do business in the December meeting since we were doing interviews. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to look at the minutes from the November. I'll take them one at a time. The November meeting first. Is there any?
I move they be approved as presented.
I second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of the November 2017 meeting as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay, one abstention, makes sense, you weren't here. And next we'll go to the December meeting minutes. If anybody would like to, any changes there or make a motion to approve those?
I'll make a motion to approve the December minutes.
And I will second it.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to accept the December 2017 minutes as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
I abstain.
Thank you. So the December minutes are approved. Okay. Our next agenda item is selection of chair and vice chair. According to our bylaws, the board selects a chair and vice chair at the January meeting to serve for the upcoming year. So we're going to open that for discussion or recommendations for chair and vice chair for this coming year.
I feel that the chair and vice chair have been doing a very good job, and I'd be real happy to see them continue on.
Okay, thank you.
Is that a motion?
Is that a motion?
Not yet, but I can make it. I move that we continue with Jan and Scott.
Second.
So it's been moved and seconded, and we did talk, Scott. We both agreed to, we would be willing to continue in these roles, so thank you for your support. So it's been moved and seconded to continue the chair and vice chair as Jan as chair and Scott Edwards as vice chair. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Well, that's moving forward. Just remember, next year, somebody else will have
Not
to come
me.
forward.
Yeah.
It's gonna be Scott next year.
There's an interest on Don's part to turn the LDAC representation over to somebody else, but why don't we also pick up that conversation when we are talking about LDAC? That makes more sense to me
That makes
as
sense.
well. Okay, don't let's forget that.
Okay, I won't forget that. I'm sure Don won't forget that.
No, Don
If
won't
we
let us
forget it,
forget,
you'll
right?
remind us.
It's number one for me. So.
Yeah. And other appointments we have currently are the sign committee, which has been done,
Yeah.
correct? Are there any other external appointments for somebody who's the board, somebody you're representing?
Not
Right now,
that
that's
I
it.
could think of.
Okay, just
No.
those two.
Yeah,
I couldn't remember either, but
I
just,
forgot about the sign committee.
which is about done, right?
Well,
It's in the process. I think it's we have agreement and we have a design and approvals and permits. I
no,
think.
we're working on the permitting phase.
That was the part with, yeah, I didn't know. We're working on the permits. And then the sign gets erected in sometime probably before spring, I would think. I can't imagine it moving any faster than that, so,
That sounds about right.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. I guess that kind of moved up there.
Yeah, but I don't have any pictures to show you because he didn't give us any, so I don't know, you know.
Normally in here, do we have time for public comments?
We do. Oh my gosh, yes.
Okay, I just,
That
just
would
in
be good.
case we have public.
I wanted to ask a question in terms of the open board position and what the approach is to dealing with the open board position.
Well, we haven't really discussed the open board position just yet. Typically, a board member would come through the application process, just like you two did, and we'd bump that up to the mayor for approval after a recommendation by us. And what we need to be thinking about is how to recruit a new board member. And Jan and I were just talking just real briefly, it would be really nice if we could hit a demographic that we don't currently represent on the board. So we have sections of the city and outside the city that are actually fairly well represented, like the city and Beaver Creek feel pretty well represented right now. But there are other sections of our service area that are very big and don't have representation. And then we also have demographics that we're not representing. And I would love to get somebody with children, because that's who we just lost with Laura. She had 2 school-age kids. So somebody with kids would be great. Or somebody younger or than, 40 would be good. So, I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking right now, what Jan and I were talking about would be nice. So I think we actually kind of need to put on our thinking caps. We can approach anybody that we think might be good, and we can run them through.
This is an at-large, right? So it's
This would be, no, out of city.
out of city, okay.
Yeah, because even though DA was at large, we did a little swapperoo on positions.
I didn't hear that. So
recently.
anyhow, okay, so it's outside
Yeah,
the
it's
city.
out of city, it's out of city. And, so, yeah, and how we haven't really talked about advertising for that or anything, cause it just happened. So, good question.
Put on my list.
So we could do that now. Have more discussion or come up with a plan, or maybe that was enough of a plan to know.
Well,
And it would be
yeah.
it's to fill out DA's term, so it would be 2 years, it expires at the end
Yeah.
of 2019. Somebody would be eligible to be reappointed, but it's only a commitment for 2 years.
2 years.
For this point. And yeah, outside of the city. And just the things that Mo said, I think would be helpful to look at part of the outside of the city area that's not as represented and demographic.
So in this coming month, I mean, I could send something out, in our newsletter, or, I mean, that would make a lot of sense on Facebook. I could do that. I think if we're individually recruiting people, just keep those things in mind,
So if we are individually recruiting, are we asking people, do they have fill out an application on the city?
It doesn't sound like from what
No.
Katie said.
I mean, when we looked at the bylaws, it said the board could appoint the vacancy, so.
Yeah, but I think even if we didn't have them apply, we would still run them through an interview process.
Yeah,
And so that's why it would be nice if we would have, like, let's say 2 candidates. That would feel very lucky, but that we would do it in 1 month, at the same time.
It would be nice to have that information though that goes with the application, I would think. I don't know if
Yeah,
it
for the
needs to be that formal,
For
but
the person, you mean?
yes.
so do people have thoughts about how to proceed, or just kind of do it?
How was it done in the past?
Well, through the city. But I mean, we've never had like a vacancy midterm,
Yeah.
not
So-
since I've been around.
But you said through the city, I mean, were these positions advertised?
Yeah,
And-
but
and
not really very
where?
well.
Yeah, and where? I mean, because we got that Pamplin paper that comes to Oregon City News. and
Was it in
I'm
there?
sure that could get into that. And
Well, where did you see it, Ken?
DA asked me to apply.
Oh, yeah.
I think
See, I
most of
mean,
it has been sort of one-on-one.
That's the
that kind
thing, like, it's usually word of mouth, I think, is how
I
things
asked
get out
Eileen
there
to
the best.
apply, and so that she was
Yeah.
rather out on one.
Yeah, and that's great, except it might not bring in the diversity that we
Yeah.
want, so we are, so let me put my brain on this and I can work with Katie. But I mean, like in the past, the city like would send out like a list of every open position at once.
You got a nice shiny piece of paper right in the on the library door when people come in?
Probably not. Just cause, just cause of clutter. But yeah, we could, put it in the,
So Mo will look at ways that we might recruit either
could do
through
your
the
newsletter.
library
That's what I was just
newsletter or
saying, yeah.
something
I think
at
the
library.
newsletter would be great, because that would be,
Facebook.
indicate somebody who's already
Online
interested in the
children's
library.
There's some neighborhood groups online
But
too.
she says that she wants.
Oh, I
young
see,
people.
for
Next,
kid- yeah.
next door, I think, and it's,
Yeah, I could have somebody stick it on next door for me. Yeah, I don't even wanna get into that.
And I think, again, for all of you as individuals, the power of that personal recruitment is, that's how I got recruited, sitting out there.
Oh, look at this.
Claire.
Connection.
People in town.
But if you can, also remember the demographics and just for some broader representation would be helpful to think about.
I mean, I think key is the fact that it's out of city, and we have to keep
Yeah,
that in mind. as
that makes it
we're
harder.
Making suggestions.
I'm gonna go back, because I forgot to do this at the upfront, now that we're on more camera, and recognize and acknowledge and welcome the 2 new board members. We did that informally before the meeting started, but now the formal meeting started, we have 2 new board members starting in January here for their 4-year term. So welcome to both Larry and Nick, and glad to have you here. And as I remember from the interviews, you both come with some very impressive qualifications that we're excited to have on the board with your experience and involvement in libraries. So welcome. Glad to have you here. So now, moving back onto the agenda, library director's report.
Well, wait, we were gonna do public comment,
Oh,
because I
I said
didn't put
public
that in.
comment, sorry.
Yep, I skipped it, so. Public comment? You have to come up here, and you have to introduce yourself and say where you're from. Thank you. Yeah, if it's not red, turn
Claire
it on.
Kellogg, I'm from Beaver Creek.
Thank you.
And I came today because I had read the article about Sandy Library, and that got me interested, and I wanted to hear if there was a response. Also, because of that article, I was just checking a few things, and I was looking online to see a book that I wanted to check out, and saw that it was there. And this book had 45 holds, only 3 copies. And I started wondering about the policy of Oregon City Library about purchasing. Another book I looked at, the one that's kind of crazy, that Fire and Fury, there were, how many holds on that? There are 365 holds, and Oregon City has 1 copy. And I was just wondering, if you look at that. The other book that had 3 copies, 45 holds, Lake Oswego, Gladstone, and Westland had it, not Sandy. But I was curious.
So the article about Sandy, from the Sandy perspective, was that if we changed the master order so that money went to capital, basically we would be taking away from operations, and that could impact the collections. And then that means that those libraries that are putting more money to collections would get hit harder by other libraries who are putting money towards capital. The point that I like to take away from that article that I think is very valid is that as a consortium, we work as a system, and what happens in one community does impact other communities. So we do need to be extremely thoughtful about making sure that, we are expending our money in the right way, irrespective of our community decisions that we might make. So it is really important that each library be doing appropriate collection development, as Claire is pointing out. So that's one of the things that I took away from that article. The other thing is they used an example of the impact, and the example was Oregon City when we were closed down to 23 hours a week. And that was from like 15 years ago. And I thought that was really not a good, not characteristic of the current situation at all. We have been open 56 hours a week for many, many years. And that was pre-district. And so that was not a good reflection of like what's going on in the district. So I don't know, that doesn't mean that the Sandy Library Director like said, oh, put this in the paper, this is a great example, that means that the reporter that wrote the article decided that that's what they were gonna use because it looked really dramatic or something,
Yeah,
you know?
that's probably right.
So, let's not like get mad at the Sandy Library for using such a strange example at all, because, as we know, from our mouths to paper is like a voyage. So then to your question about, and if, for those of you who don't know, Claire was a librarian at Lake Oswego Library as well. So she comes to us with a very, very, very well-informed mind on this. We have an agreement amongst the libraries that we try to have a 5-to-1 ratio for holds. So if there's 45 holds, what's 45 times? You know, we should have like a lot of copies, right? So, I mean, like we should have 9 copies if there's 45 holds, right? So, now when it comes to Fire and Fury, you know, no library is ever going to have enough copies of that. And honestly, you have to kind of look at that and say, oh, this is a flash in the pan. And, you know, how many copies do you want? Because you're going to be getting rid of like, oh my God, if you filled all those holds, and that's the problem everywhere, you're going to be spending a lot of money and then getting rid of a lot of books that are taking up a lot of space down the road because they're not circulating down the road, right? So you still need to get some. The problem is right now that they are unattainable and Ingram is not filling their orders quickly. And so we have some on order. The catalog, what the catalog does not show is what could be on order because Oregon City doesn't use the acquisitions module in that way. And so anything that's on order in Oregon City, isn't that right? Doesn't show up right now. Right, yeah.
Is it from other libraries? Are
It
other libraries
does-
using that?
It does sometimes show up, yep. Yep. So one of my goals is to get there, but so that doesn't reflect if there's things on order. But to be honest, we probably missed the boat on that particular item. And then what happens is like every week? That
The
report comes
report.
out from
Purchase alert.
Network, and it kind of gives the current state of holds to books, to items. And the people who purchase items are supposed to look through that and then purchase accordingly. And so it's a little reactive because by the time you have that many holds, you know, then you have to wait for new things to come in, which may or may not be on order, and I couldn't tell you. But, you know, the job of the people who buy books is to look at those. And so I am sure that my person looks at them. How timely that is done, I couldn't guarantee. But yeah, it's when we don't have the right ratios, there are library directors in the system who will give us a call and let us know that we're not keeping up our end of the bargain. So that does happen. Yeah, so that's kind of what you're addressing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's always a good thing to be thinking about and looking at, for sure.
Claire, are you, can you access Multnoma's data bank?
Yeah?
Have you checked out those figures with Multnomah? I mean, they're huge up there.
Oh, no, this was just sort of a random,
Just for here,
you know,
okay, yeah.
question about that. Lake Oswego used to have a unique system for purchasing a whole bunch of copies and giving preference to Lake Oswego residents. I'm not so sure that's still going on.
So, no, it's not going on specifically, but what all of us have started doing instead is we've all created a Lucky Day collection in-house.
That's right.
And so the Lucky Day collections are like, you know, 1 or 2 copies or whatever in-house, and no holds can be placed on the Lucky Day collections. So it's like it's your lucky day if you walk in and you see a copy, right? Is the idea. And so often, you know, it'll be like buy 1 of those for that collection and then 3 into the new book collection or whatever.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Thank you very much.
You are very welcome.
Can I
Thank you for being
clarify,
here.
Claire, were your concerns primarily around the collection or just the overall issue with the LDAC and the master?
I don't even know what LDAC is.
The Library District Advisory Committee,
new-
which is
oh,
the
okay. Oh,
master.
yeah. No, it
That's
was
a
mainly
master
that is what I was
plan, yeah.
interested in. And
Because
heard
we will
about
have some
changes.
more discussion
Yeah.
about that at the end of the meeting, so
Yep.
just. Thanks.
Great.
Okay.
Okay, library board
Library
director?
Board
Or
Director,
Library
Library
director
Director's
report.
report, so.
Who am I? What are we talking about? Okay, so the statistics, I did mention to you that, this is a really good time for us to be looking at statistics and thinking about adding some or even subtracting some. You know, I want them to be, if we're gonna track stuff, I want them to be valuable. And, what I started with doing was kind of starting reformatting this just a little bit as far as like where things are, and I kind of explained that in my email that I sent out to you. So if you look at November, for instance, there's the door count and then there's direct loans. And you guys, if you want to look at this, there's a notebook back there with a copy of everything in it. I've got a total of the all the items excluding the ebook items, the e-materials, and then I've got the e-figure and then a total of everything together. And that's at the top there. And then another change that I've made already at Nick's request, I've added the number of registered borrowers, and that's down near the bottom of the page. Usually I just gave the number of new registrants, you know, new card holders. And I thought I'd give you a figure to kind of, you could see the variation in this. And it's really interesting. It doesn't seem like, you know, it's like people drop off every month and then every so often they'll do a big purge up at Network. And so we just went through kind of a big purge of people that, I believe it's 3 years, right? Mm-hmm. Don't use their library card in 3 years. Then they get dropped from the list. And somebody asked me this question. Was it you? You're asking good questions these days. Somebody asked me, well, like, if people use the building but never check anything out, they'd get dropped off the list.
They would.
Yeah, they would, which doesn't really seem right, but I don't know. Maybe we change our criteria of who we purge, you know?
I'm sure it goes by checkout.
Yeah, it goes by checkout. If they're, go ahead.
Different questions.
Yeah, no, that's right.
So on the statistics, then the current month to the far would be my left is the 2017, and current month, the other one is
Yeah,
last
sorry,
year.
that's not so clear, so
that's
I can clarify
I just
that.
want to be sure
Yeah.
that I'm,
Yeah.
so you're getting a comparison of month to month, and you'd been doing a fiscal year to date, but that,
Yeah, it fell off when
Yeah.
I can add that back in. I need somebody who is halfway decent at Excel to come help me a little bit.
so door count's been going up, but circulation's been going
Exactly,
down.
exactly.
Which seems odd, but
Well, it doesn't really seem odd because I think there is a national trend of circulation going down a bit. So, you know, I'm just thrilled we have so many people in the building. But it does kind of say, because it does kind of tell you that people are using the library in a little bit different ways. You know, there's more of it as a, you know, a place than as a place to get items for reading and stuff.
I assume that also reflects that you've had more programs, so more people.
Well, definitely more people in the building, and another thing that I'm not really tracking is how often, like, the meeting rooms are filled. So if, like, the Chamber of Commerce holds a meeting, they're getting counted on the door counter, but I don't really count that as, like, anything. And I need to think about, like, that activity and how we want it reflected. You know, because it's certainly use, and it could be quite a bit of staff time, too. So, like, if the Chamber of Commerce is presenting a PowerPoint, for instance, that we have to help them set that up. You know, even though it like should be like super easy, it never is somehow. And we'll continue to work on that. But we need to be sure that their technology is, they can deal with their technology before we can just like let them be. If they don't have technology, then it's pretty easy. But if technology is involved, it gets more difficult. So that this really doesn't like currently very well reflect like staff time on a lot of things in a lot of ways. But I mean, for what it's showing, definitely programs are increasing. We're working on making sure that the programs that we have reflect what our community wants at the time our community wants them. And that is a $64,000 question sometimes. You know, what sounds really interesting, you know, it's hard to get at if people will come to it or if it's you're offering it at the right time. Yeah.
So I have a question on the holds sent to other libraries, which is in parentheses.
Yep.
Which I assume is a negative number
Yep.
of some kind?
No, I'm subtracting. That's what it does when you subtract. So, I want to subtract those numbers because what we receive from other libraries is almost twice as much as what we send out. That is another collection indicator.
Yeah.
That is not good. So that means we have to have that many more books coming in than we are helping the rest of the district with. And so I want that number, that difference, to be as small as possible. I want those two numbers that received and sent to be closer to equal. And so that's why I changed that into a subtraction, so that we can understand that really quickly.
That helps, thank you.
Yeah, that's what's going on there. So you can see a year ago, for some reason, we actually loaned more books than we did this last month. You know, who knows what was going on and why we had that particular, we're able to meet that particular need that last year, but that's what was going on. And then reference questions, I just have to tell you, reference has been all over the page as far as statistics that I get from staff. I have nothing to do with this. I know they're out there at the reference desk working really hard, talking to people all the time. Whether they're actually ticking their little easy online thing is another question entirely. So, doesn't take much training. All they have to do is touch the screen or push a button, but that has been very inconsistent, those figures, so I don't want you to draw any conclusions from that, actually. So everything else looks pretty, any other conclusions? We did have half off for the holidays, and we made a good amount of money. So we annually we match people's fines, and we do it for pretty much a month, starting at Thanksgiving all the way to New Year's. And so this December we did bring in $900, more than $900 than we did last December. I don't know what, if anything, that is indicative of, but it's nice to have the money. It's also nice to have people back in the library sometimes if this fines really prevent them from using the library, because we have a $25 block. Once you get a 25, you're blocked from checking more items out. So, at some point, a lot of library directors in Clackamas County would love to see fines on children's materials go away, but we are very split on that topic, and we do bring us in a substantial amount of money on those, that you can't just turn away $10,000, You've got to really think about that, and be able to justify it to your city manager. I think my city manager would be fine with it, but it's kind of one of those things that we need to do system-wide. They've done it in Multnomah County and Washington County, so, yeah.
And it gives an incentive for returns also.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the whole.
Well, the fine is not always an incentive for a return. I mean, you think it is, but just because you are not fined, if you don't bring the book back, you will be charged for the book, and probably sooner than if you had the fine system in place. So that's the thing. It's pretty soon what you're going to have showing up at your house is a bill for the book,
It's you.
not a bill for the fine. And so you would be blocked if you didn't bring your books back still.
So how long is that period of time?
Oh, I don't know. This is all just conjecture because
Okay.
we won't be able to get people to agree on it, so, yeah. But just so you know.
Okay.
But it would be a substantial amount of money. So Denise has figured out how many people that would impact. And, we have a number of kids who are blocked, though, don't we? Yeah, I mean, that's the thing, so. Anyway, so any questions about statistics?
A lot of
yeah,
materials withdrawn. A lot more materials withdrawn.
That kind of goes up and down.
Well, in materials too, you'll see some more this month. We're finishing up the RFID project, and there is a pretty good list of things that haven't been RFID tagged yet, and so I'm out in the stacks looking for them, and when I don't find them, they're being discarded.
Okay.
So there'll probably be one more hit for that.
What's really nice about that is it cleans up the database. You know, so the stuff on the shelf, if it's really not on the shelf, then it's getting taken away and it doesn't look like it's sitting there. Yeah. So that RFID project was really helpful in cleanup. Don?
Well, yeah, in other worlds that I worked in where statistics are thrown up, usually they throw columns and all that stuff, but then they usually have like some kind of a graph analysis, like it started here and this is where we're going, some kind of a line that goes along, so you kind of get an idea of the history of it by that line. I've always found those helpful, but that sounds like a lot of work for you, so I don't.
It does, doesn't it? Let's
Yes.
avoid that. No, I would be happy to do some things like that if we could identify specific things that we
That's-
thought
yeah,
that would
that's-
be most helpful on.
Yeah, okay.
So what do you think would be most helpful for you to see over time, a visual?
Well, I don't know if door count really means anything anymore, does it? I mean, we got a lot of people in, but it doesn't have a connection to books unless you throw two lines up like this and you can see that.
Well, I
all of a
think
sudden now-
right there is what's meaningful.
Yeah,
If it doesn't have a connection to books, which was not always the case, because they could be in there looking at the Oregon History Collection, they
Reading
could
the
be looking
newspaper,
at
yeah.
reference materials, or does it matter if it doesn't have a connection to books? Like, the point is, we have people using the library, how they're using it is of utmost interest,
yeah.
you know? So,
Second question was like, okay, on computer usage, I think our computer usage is much more than what those numbers show. Because people come in with their own little laptops and all they have to do is.
right, all of this reflects is the in-house computers, that's right.
Right.
I have
right.
really no way of capturing the other number.
Well, yeah, I think there is a way.
Sure.
If you go and
Well, I'm
try to
not
use
gonna go and count
Starbucks, Starbucks Wi-Fi, they ask you to identify yourself and log
Well,
in,
we
you know.
could-
That's what
Yeah.
I'm thinking, we could ask Link.
We could ask, well, yeah, but that would probably capture like a lot of phones and everything, right?
If they're connected to the Wi-Fi.
I've seen people camped
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
on your front stoop, using your Wi-Fi, you know,
Yeah.
after you've closed, so.
Well, you know, I mean, we could look into it, we certainly
Yeah.
could look into that. You know, we would have to think about like, what does that number capture though?
And
You
the
know,
only
and
reason I
does
bring-
it, what does it tell
The only
us?
reason I bring that up is that we're getting into strategic planning here, and I think one of the questions, if not many of the questions about our strategic planning is, what is our technological answer to the future? Is it gonna be more computing power? I know we have the network to help us with that, but if that's the need of the community, then we need to look at that somehow. But if we don't know what's going on, how can we plan for it? There's a long way around for that, but that's my question.
Yeah, well, and that's good, and, I mean, you know, we can inform ourselves about what we think is gonna happen in the future, and try and match things up, yeah.
We need some help on that, I guess.
I guess I thought maybe you were going, is there a connection between this increased users, but maybe leveling of checkup, if more people are coming to use the space for
Well,
computer hookup or just as quiet
no,
space or
for-
to study?
for-
I mean, I think all of those things are users that maybe aren't doing, checking out materials.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's
Mo-
still a valuable service.
Yeah,
if
Mo
that's-
knows from my perspective, I'm a big, getting feedback all of a sudden here. I'm a big, I was a big promoter of ebooks. And I bought some for the library and, but then I look at the statistics here and it's down around 3,000-4,000, something like that, you know? And I'm saying, I thought by this time that it would be much larger, you know? But no. So
Well,
there's something
so-
going on there too.
The other thing we know is that the system of checking out ebooks through the library is not as elegant as we would like.
Yes, I
It is,
know.
and so probably there are a lot of people who access ebooks a different way because they just don't want to put up with the inconvenience of what the library does.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you know, if we had a different system, we might capture a lot more people.
Well, I put a book on reserve for a Kindle thing, download. I forgot about it, you know, and all of a sudden I get a notice that it's now available. I thought, oh, well, that was like back in July. I put this request in and all of a sudden it comes through. Now, it could have gotten lost in the system. I can't imagine that a science fiction book had that many people cranking after it, but, so I thought, I'm gonna bring that up at the meeting, by gosh.
Well,
'cause, yeah,
sorry about that.
It's a good book. I'm reading it. It's a,
Good.
yeah, I love it.
Well, if it was that good, maybe it was that and did have holes on it, because that's the thing, it's like, just because it's digital doesn't mean it's, you know, a gazillion copies are available.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
No, I mean, that's, you know that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so those are some of my questions.
All right.
Thanks. So I think, I appreciate Mo, the opportunity to kind of give feedback on if there's other data that would be helpful. I couldn't quite think of anything, but I think it's a good discussion and kind of seeing that as we think around the strategic planning, that's probably when we will identify, like, oh, it would have been nice to have known that.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean,
But
and
that's,
this is
I think,
something,
part of the iterative process,
just
which is
kind
good,
of, yeah, put in your brain, tuck it away. Yes.
I'm sure you get feedback from the patrons, and, I mean, are we getting complaints or questions that somebody is writing down to keep track of what people are not happy with or overly happy with?
Well, like, what can you think of? Let's see. We have some people who are without homes, who are unhappy that we make them stay with their stuff
Or not sleep,
or not sleep,
or not eat.
or not eat. We have heard no parking complaints. People will make collection requests, lots of times. We get that online. What complaints have we had? It's too noisy. I'm working on that.
Okay, well, I was just curious, there's a lot of people walk in there, not everybody's gonna be happy.
That's true. A lot of people walk in unhappy and leave happy because it's such a nice space and our staff is so nice.
Oh, okay.
But,
Well, in the interest of time, I think
Yeah.
if we can we'll keep moving to the more narrative report.
I think you guys know that we won the DeMuro Award from Restore Oregon. We've had a meeting since then, right? That was really fun. We've hired 10 new on-calls. We had some longtime people retire, and I think I kind of kept you abreast of that. Yeah, so we've started training those people. Programs are cranking along, but we're working at our in-house processes for programs to make sure that all details are covered, such as staffing, which is one of the details that gets lost quite often.
By
Yes.
the way, your staff posted a video of the little girls doing their ballet.
Yeah,
I forwarded it like this, and my people out there are just going nuts over it. They think it's just really cool.
yeah, it's really cute, isn't it? Yeah.
Yep. So
Well-
I'm glad that the staff is doing stuff like that, that,
Yeah.
you know, you can pass along to people, so.
Well, Aaron is our PR person, and he
She's done
does
good.
just a bang-up job, I think, on social media and getting news out there. And speaking of which, you all must have heard about the tweet that went viral that was about the Oregon City Library. No?
Say it again for the record.
Okay, well, so we have a patron who is known as the angriest librarian.
Angry librarian.
Angry librarian. He might now be the angriest. I'm not sure. I think he changed it. And he has a huge following because a couple months ago, he did some intellectual freedom or some big topic that Trump was tromping on. And he went out there and had a very articulate argument and got a ton of followers on Twitter. And he comes to the library all the time, and he loves his local library. He's from Oregon City. And he posted this picture, like right before Christmas, wasn't it? Of this little bin that we have in the children's area that we call the lick bucket.
Yeah, that.
And it's got a picture of a pug on the cute of it, really cute pug licking his tongue, and it just says, parents, if your children have like licked the toys, please put it in this bucket and we'll clean it, something along that line, right? And he just put a picture of it on Twitter and said, really excellent librarianing here, something along those lines. And people were responding like, really, librarianing? That's a word? And they're like, lick bucket? What? And what? And then this one guy was like, kid, shouldn't they call them children? So then Aaron took a picture of on Photoshop, he like superimposed a picture of a little plastic kid, goat kid, on that picture and then posted that, which also was really hysterical too. But it got picked up by a celebrity, Chrissy Teigen, who was stuck on a plane, and which also made the news. And she has massive quantities of Twitter followers, so it went like viral out there. She's like, "Lick bucket, Luna is not licking anything yet," or something like that, like their little kid. And so everybody had to tell her the story about the horrible things that their children
kids are licking.
licked. And it was like our picture was at the center of it. So we are now known in the Twitterverse for our lick bucket.
So when
Which
we
is
go
simply
visiting, people ask, are
hysterical.
you from Lick Bucket, Oregon?
Yeah, you could say yes. So it says to ask you about pints from the past.
Well, we've been working with the Museum of the Oregon Territory, which is Clackamas County Historical Society. And when we first started this, it was basically Claire Blaylock, the executive director, and I, and it was kind of our own little shindig. And for those of you who don't know, it's where you go get to drink beer and eat and then hear a history speaker. And so that was kind of like our gig, and we did it the way we wanted to back in the beginning. But since then, she's moved on, and I kind of moved it on to Erin. And it's just been a little bit harder to ensure that the programs that are offered fall into the marketing strategy of what we're hoping to do for the Oregon City Library. So we're just making sure that we have the best fit possible if we're going to be expending staff time on it. So we're working on that. We're going to keep working with them, but it's just been a little bit twitchy this year. And so there's been some changes to the schedule, and I think that we've got it figured out and everything, but it's just been kind of stop and starting. We want to keep working with them. They're great. But sometimes when people change, it changes the flow of how things operate. So, and everybody has to expend staff time on it, so we just want to make sure that it really works for people. So, if you see changes to the schedule on that, that's what's going on with that. Let's see if there's anything else on this. We're gonna move the LDAC conversation. I think we finished the pre-processing, which is really important because with Ingram, our vendor, we finished that profiling. It took forever and a day. And so now the books that come in are pre-covered, pre-labeled, and essentially like very close to shelf ready, which is a way in which we could outsource just a tiny chunk of work to a vendor that already was doing work for us, so that we could, now that our library is bigger and we're buying more, we could process more without increasing staff in the technical services department. So that got done, and so now we can focus on working with Ingram and their collection development group on expending $50,000 that the foundation is giving us for more books. And I think that will be that should go a little bit easier and faster. So that will be really good. Looking forward to that. So we're finally there.
And then upcoming, you have something about RFID next and final step. Is that just what you were talking about, Denise? Just kind of the wrap? Oh no, there's something else.
Well, there's something else. Go ahead, you describe.
So the final step of it is that now when we get our courier, the books coming in from other libraries that are either to go back on our shelf or holds for our patrons, we have to check those items in one at a time. We have to get hold slips for them before they go on the shelf. When all is said and done, we'll get things in a crate, like 50, 60 things in a crate, and the crate has a barcode on it. We check in that barcode and we can take them right to the shelf. Mm-hmm. We don't have to spend the time putting on all of the hold slips. Oregon City is going to be the pilot library for this to start, and it should be by the end of the month. It's going to be a little double duty for us at the beginning because we'll be the only one tagging, so we'll have to do all of our stuff and all of the stuff going out of our library. But in the long run, when everybody is done, it will cut our courier time down to 30 minutes instead of 2 hours.
Yeah,
Good.
that's exciting.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
For us,
Particularly given the amount of holds coming in.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, and especially if we want them to increase, which we do. I mean, going out actually too, yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll do those, the ones
Yes.
going out in the future.
Yes, we'll,
yeah.
we'll always do the ones going out.
Yeah.
And then the comment here about new city software, does that mean?
Well, the finance department has been leading a charge on new city software that covers all the basic, functions, the payroll functions, all those things, the administrative stuff. And they are considering, there's a component in there for scheduling software, but it's like pretty basic. But they're considering, if enough people want it and could actually use it, a module for scheduling that's very advanced. So Denise and I are gonna attend a demo on it because we need to be sure that it can do at least what we currently can do. For like relatively inexpensive, we pay $1,700 a year for what we have. Now, the police pay more like $9,000 for what they do, which is obviously gonna be just a little bit more complicated yet again than what we do because they're 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, that's just what that is. That's just a possibility of improving software and being actually then tied into the city in that area, which would be pretty nice. Because otherwise, we share licenses and all that kind of stuff with the city, but we don't have any administrative tie into the city.
Okay. Just another thing.
Just another thing. Yeah, it's just like another administrative type of thing.
Okay.
So that might really improve Denise's life. You never
Yes.
know. Yeah, it could. So then it's important if it's a staff improvement, so. And then the retreat is annual, but we have a biennial budget. And so this year, it's just basically like a status report and kind of discussing what's happening in the coming year. Oh my God, I have to finish that thing by tomorrow. Yikes. And so that's a lot easier than the years we do a budget. And if there's budget adjustments that need to be made, then they just get made kind of in-house and approved through a commission meeting. And as far as I know, we're doing great on our budget. So, yeah, she's in charge.
Okay. Anything else on the narrative? And then the last is the strategic planning timeline.
Right, so I don't think I have shared this with you in the past, and so I thought I would share the color-coded timeline with you, and it's all the code for what those stand for is at the end. But we're moving along, now we're like several months into it, and we're following the, what is the name of that book? Strategic Planning for Libraries or whatever that everybody uses. I think I showed that to you, didn't I? That one.
So, yeah.
And you'll recall that Darcy Hanning from the State Library is the person who's consulting with us on this and helping walk through this. And so we're on our third community question, which is we're doing 3, and we've had it online and then in the foyer. And it's been, what one thing would make your life easier? Why do you live in Oregon City? And
What would make the community?
what?
What would make the community better?
Yeah, what one thing would make the community better? So, they're just kind of background, collect information, but get a general feel for the community these days. So we've gotten a lot of interesting answers because the funny thing is the one in the foyer, a lot of kids answer those. And it's pretty hysterical, some of the things that we see. And they draw us pictures too, which is really nice. So we're collecting those and sorting those, and those will help kind of just feed our conversation. But we'll be having a staff half day, which what we've had so far was a full staff day for full-time staff and our 30-hour-a-week people. And then this will bring in everybody and kind of bring them up to speed on stuff. And then, before we know it, we'll be scheduling a day of bringing in stakeholders and kind of moving that conversation forward as to what we should be looking at in the future. And that will be a facilitated conversation, and we'll be looking for representation from this board on that. So I just thought this might be interesting for you to kind of see. This kind of gives you an outline of some of the steps too that we're kind of going for. Some things are still a little bit on the way of unknowns, but it kind of gives you that nice outline. Questions,
Any questions? I
comments?
thought it seemed rather ambitious. That was my thought, particularly.
Well, you know, it's not, doesn't have to be a hard deadline either, at all. And, you know, we did create this a few months ago, and we definitely can adjust it. But, you know, we have a strategic plan that lasts through 2018, but we've accomplished most of it, and I mean, we've built the building, and it's time to really like look at new things. So, you know, whether it's 2018, 2019, whatever, whenever it gets done, it's the right time to be looking at this, so I feel really good about that. And then our next plan will take us past my retirement, which I think is, I know I keep saying that, my retirement. So I think that's important too, so that we get the library past, and past a transition, another transition, because we've gone through a lot of changes.
Yeah. No, I think it's the right thing to do. I mean, clearly, we're at a different phase. It
Yeah.
just is-
Yeah, exactly.
Having just recently still participated in the city's tourism strategic
Oh.
planning, which has taken a little longer than I think they
Yeah.
thought, so I'd say ambitious.
Okay.
Any other questions for Mo in terms of her general library director report? Okay, the next agenda item is around the LDAC. I'm gonna hold on the letter from Kathleen Drain from
Yeah.
Sandy and move that to that whole discussion around LDAC issues, but first we have the LDAC draft annual report. So LDAC, again, being Library District Advisory Committee. And we submit an annual report to them, and you had a draft in our packet.
Right, so, first of all, I don't have this completely filled out. It's supposed to be kind of like you and I, LDAC requested that you and I kind of do it together, but I realize that I have access to the information that you don't. But I thought, well, at least we could discuss it, and then I can like float you back a copy of the completed one. But I didn't really have time to, okay, I had time had I started this a long time ago. But since I didn't start it a long time ago, what was really great is I got the final version of this draft report to work on instead of like the not final version of the draft report, even though it might still change again, you know, like at the most final. But then, since it was the holidays and everything else, things were busy. So page 1 is pretty straightforward. And what's really interesting, I mean, I think these figures are very interesting. The city population, I didn't put those in. They were filled in for me. So this is reported at a certain state and time by a certain accepted group of the city or the county or whatever. The county filled in those figures. Once I said what library I was, it populated those figures.
But it's helpful because it shows how many are inside the
Yeah,
city,
exactly.
outside the city.
Exactly.
and
Even if the
using our
city is a
service.
little bit more, you know, probably outside the city is a
But
little bit
it's
more now too.
pretty
But
even.
You generally get a feel for the population breakdown on that. So, so that's pretty intriguing. And we do have a very big service area. I mean, 58,000 is a lot of people. So, and then our board composition, and I just had my city manager ask me this today. He's like, we have out-of-city representation. I'm like, not to worry. We have always had out-of-city representation. You know, our bylaws specifically call for it, which is awesome. So, you know what the makeup is. It's well, like right now, or when I filled this out for the date that they asked for, there was 3, because it was DA. We had 3 people living outside the district, outside of city limits, and we had 4 living inside. But the board makeup is such, as I described below, that we always at least have 2, and then we have an at-large. Often, the at-large person has lived outside the city, but there's no requirement that they do. So it's 4 in-city, 2 out-of-city, and then 1 at-large. So it generally makes for a pretty nice mix. And if at some point in time we need to, you know, make it so that there's 1 more outside of the city one, we could, you know, but at least there are other cities who do not have any outside of the city representation on their library board. So you can imagine that people feel very ill represented, but we always have, so I feel very good about that. So any questions about that first page? Pretty straightforward. Then the next page is all about the money. And I need to go back and look at my figures for the starting balances. And I have to tell you, the way Oregon City does its finances, I look at the starting balances and I'm like, I'm rich. You know, I never understand, sorry, I never understand it. That's why we have a finance department and they say, no, this is your amount of money, and then we take it from there, you know. But so I'll go get those figures and I'll make it all work, but they're gonna be way bigger figures than you think. And part of that was because of the construction and stuff. You know, all that money came through our budget, you know. So I'll get that stuff. It'll all match up. But basically, the 2.5, the library district revenue, that's where it starts getting, I think, very interesting for us in that next section. So it's pretty straightforward. You know, we get pretty much 2.1 million from the district. As of last year, that's what this is, the city was giving us 200,000. Now this year, that's dropped down to 100,000. Yeah, cut. We get ready to read. We did not get a bunch of these other things. LSTA, other federal funds, blah, blah, blah. Our fines, fees, and donations in-house came to 66,000. So you can see that we make quite a bit every year on fines and fees. And then that capital figure, you know, that's 310, and I believe that is reported from the foundation last year. I believe that's what that is. So there's a lot of blanks down here that I still need to figure out. But generally, I think what's really important, you know, I think leaving capital aside, because that went through the money from the county, from the reserves that we saved, and from the bonds. That basically, the capital for the building all came through that, and the foundation. You know, so that kind of muddies the waters a little bit. Basically, you're looking at, you know, 2.3 in income, a little bit more annually for this last year. So then I started filling in the salaries down at the bottom, the salaries and wages. As you know, that's always going to be your biggest expense, so that's over $1 million. Collections, that's everything. That's audio, that's everything. And then other operating expenditures, so that's, oh gosh, cleaning supplies, everything you can think of that's in the building. And then one of the other points that they're really trying to get at here is allocated costs. And so an allocated cost is, as you know, an administrative fee that the city charges to a department. And in Oregon City, the only allocated cost we are charged is for city IT. And we have county IT, which is the network, provides us with software and all kinds of support. And that's the library stuff, it's library specific. And then the city provides us with, you know, Word and Excel and internet, all kinds of internet. I mean, they provide all kinds of other stuff. And that is kind of split up by a guesstimate of use by the finance department. So for instance, they are charged like $39,000, we're charged $5,000. So I mean, it's very, very fair, and I can tell you that we get way more than $5,000 worth of help from city IT. I mean, they are over there a lot, helping us with stuff. So that's like the only thing you could even consider an allocated cost, and in some respects you could consider it a direct cost, I guess, I don't know. But that's the only thing, as opposed to like Canby, that does not contribute anything to its library and charges allocated fees.
Of $50,000.
Well, no, that's just for one thing. That's
Oh,
just for one thing.
That's what?
I mean, they get charged rent, they get charged HR, they get charged city manager, they get charged. So every department in Canby gets charged a portion of the administrative costs. And that's rough, I think. If it's coming out of the general fund, then it feels really fair, but when it's coming out of the district fund, it feels a little different. So So I'm sorry that's not all complete. I can assure you that it all balances, that we've got great people in finance making sure, and we've got Denise overseeing our budget. I will get that filled out and I'll send that to you. Don and I are supposed to bring this back more or less completed on the meeting on the 25th, right?
25th, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for the people that have been talking for months and months and months about all this to get to our line here, because I'm sure we're being watched very closely because
Which line are you talking about?
line 2.19. Total revenue versus capital expenses, 2.24. And you know, see our capital expenses are just about as much as our total revenue, so that.
Yeah, but I don't have everything there, so.
I know, but I
Yeah.
mean, if that figure was
Yeah.
transported to them right now, I think they would blow their top, so,
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
but I mean,
hey.
it's not
What else is
complete.
new?
Actually, I'm
been doing it for
surprised that
months,
you
so.
are including that capital in that.
Well,
I mean, it's not operating, it's
right,
below the line, it's a different.
it is a different
category.
fund, yeah, it is a
And
different.
then you make that note about what the bond payments are. That seems like that would be,
Yeah,
I mean, it's operating in a sense because you're doing it on.
well, that's where the argument is, and we'll talk more about that when we talk about the master order. But that's the concern, is like how much money is diverted away from operations for capital.
But it's totally different. I mean, you're illustrating it twice. I mean, basically what you're saying is that 400,000 is being allocated to pay off the bond. And I don't know how long the bond is out there, but it's still
Long
not,
time.
but at the end of that, you're gonna have a building. I mean, you're gonna have a paid off building, it's gonna have value. So, I mean, I just think it's a different than, I think mixing them together doesn't really illustrate it correctly.
Okay, well, I can tell them that, because, I mean, I didn't format this report, so. But that's what they're trying to find out, which actually, the bond repayment is not even broken out in this. So they wouldn't, I would have to tell them that, so. It's not really getting after what they want to know.
Right, and
Yeah.
next year it's gonna be totally different because you're not
Yeah.
gonna have that $2
Right,
million.
yeah,
I mean,
all that
it's
stuff is
like-
gonna be gone, yeah, it's already been distributed. Okay, so anyway, but then I had the note about the bond payment on the next page. And then, the allocated cost detail. So they wanna have a lot of detail here, and then fortunately, our allocated cost, we only have that one note about IT. So that's on page whatever. 2.44, and bottom of the next page, $5,000 total. So that's pretty straightforward. Then we go into, I can avoid all this because it's about allocated costs. The next, where there's, I did talk about the IT thing there, so they've got that note. And then section 3 is on service standards, and the reason I added the Oregon Library Association standards to your packet, because we just went through this. And, so, we're open 56 hours a week, 50 is our threshold, which is not a word even used by the Oregon Library Association anymore, but whatever, They're gonna try and change that word in the master order. I keep on saying, do not use that word threshold. Just use like most basic or something like that, because like that terminology is out the window. But anyway, does the library director have an MLS? Yes. Total library FTE, and then threshold level per the IGA attachment C. Okay, so first thing you need to know is the attachment C of the IGA are the standards from about 10 years ago, obviously 10 years ago, when the IGA was signed, the intergovernmental agreement between all of the cities. Those have changed, and they're less numerically specific now. But that's the figure they put in there because according to the IGA, that's what we're supposed to still be meeting. So you can see that according to the IGA, we're supposed to have 19.09 people. And this self-populated, I didn't do it. And we have 14.9. So we're understaffed. I mean, that's nothing I don't already know. You know, we're doing the best we can. And as you all know, benefits are very, very expensive. But I mean, you know, all the on-calls build up to make the 14.9 as well. So there you go. As far as how many people we have on staff who have master's degrees, we're doing well there. Our volumes owned, we're a little bit under there, but because we can include digital, we don't look as bad as we should. But we're working on that. And Larry paid me a very big compliment the other day by saying what we have is excellent. And it has been very cleaned out, so it should be excellent, yeah. So then 3.11, the question of like, does my library meet all essential standards? Well, of the most recent OLA standards, you know, I really have a problem with that question because we went through those standards, right? And one of the problems with the standards and why we're revising them is it's very difficult to tell when you meet a standard. If there's 10 check boxes and you check 9, yes, but one of them is no, have you met the standard? And the current standards do not say when you've met a standard. So like, I think that, I know what they're getting at, but I think for the most part, we meet most of the standards. Do we meet those two standards that they just said, like we're under collection size and we are understaffed? Well, no, we don't, if that's the criteria. You know, so I didn't really know what to say without going into a big, long explanation. Since I'm on the standards committee, I just feel a little bit like I don't want to just say yes or no. You know what I mean? I want to like explain the standards a little bit to people who are not really using the standards. So that gets my ire up just a little bit. But then I try to describe what's going on, where I thought we didn't meet essential. So at least I get to put in a narrative. So on 3.13, I decided to let them know what I thought about their use of the standards and where they currently are. And, you know, it's a tool. The way they are in Oregon, they're not required to be, you know, point by point, like you must meet these things. There is no money attached to it whatsoever from the state. You know, yeah, people should definitely, library directors should definitely try to meet as many standards as possible. But as we know from looking at those standards, that's also a place where the community can have a little bit of input on, like, if you're going to prioritize, let's think about certain things. So, and we all have to prioritize. Nobody is like so flush that they don't have to prioritize. So.
Was we're meeting the standards part of the intergovernmental agreement? Or is
And the intergovernmental agreement says, and this might come back, you know, up and get reopened for discussion again. Right now, it says that we all agree to strive to meet the standards. Well, I think we are striving pretty hard here, and I think we're doing pretty well, but it's a process, it's a journey. But definitely, as, you know, Claire pointed out, and as like Sandy, library letter writer, pointed out, you know, we are part of a system, so we absolutely must do our best. You know, other people are counting on us to hold up, you know, our end of the stick. So that's that section.
Let me just ask, maybe I missed this point at the beginning. So is this a new report?
This is a brand new report.
That's because I don't remember this from before.
So, sorry not to give you any background on it.
Well, they had a subcommittee that came up with this stuff, and it kind of it's an amalgamation of the old one and then what they want to find out, you know, so those things are in there. I showed it to my son-in-law, who was on the LDAC for a while and is an advocate at the Estacada Library, trying to get those numbers out into the public and la 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 la. But he really liked it. So, you know, he's a very smart man. So I'm saying, okay, it's something, we could live with that, right?
Yeah.
There's parts of it that are, but generally, if it helps the whole district kind of look at everything all at once on a level playing ground, that's great,
So where this came from is when we went from having part citizen, part library director advisory committee to all citizen. The citizen said, how are we supposed to be able to tell the Board of County Commissioners that the libraries are indeed doing their job? We have to have some kind of information, a reporting system by which we would know this. And so then we talked about what that would look like. We finally formed a subcommittee. And this is kind of a nice combination of statistics that we already gather for the state every year. And that's what you might have seen some of these before. So that just gets populated. And other pieces of information like the allocated cost that you can't get anywhere but straight from the library director, right? So that's kind of where this came from. They need a tool to be able to report to the Board of County Commissioners because that's what they're charged with, is like making sure that the money is going to the right places. And it actually, the report concept, we started this years ago when it was mostly directors, when the allocated cost thing came up. We were like, well, I wonder what that looks like everywhere. Basically, that's what we said. Well, I wonder what that looks like across the board. Everybody does things so differently. And then it grew into this through a committee process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have an IGA that is the legal document that says, for this money, you must do this. You have
No, for this money, you will try to do this.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a
But
big
there's an
difference
agreement,
there.
okay, but there's an agreement
Yeah.
for receiving money, there are some things that you
Yes.
need to do.
Yep.
You have a citizens advisor group that's advising the board to say, yes, you have this intergovernmental agreement, but we have another advisory to tell you whether that's working or.
Yeah, every
people are doing it.
district, every county service district, which is what we have, has an advisory group.
And then this
Yeah.
is their desire to gather information so they can put together more of a narrative and feel confident.
Exactly, because then these statistics should be coming straight from the library. So they should be as accurate as possible. And then they're not guessing. And then, if they have a problem with something like, say, Canby does allocated cost, but they look like they're unreasonable, then they could go back and maybe ask the question, like, how did you get to that amount? That looks really unfair to us. Can you just tell us that? So, yeah.
Okay.
And then the last part is just, report who your people are. And I didn't even completely fill that out, because we know. And then this will get submitted, to Greg or something. Greg is the keeper, he's the manager of the,
It's amazing. Right. And then what happens after that, couldn't tell you. It's kind of up to the County Board of Commissioners, which is the governing body of the library district.
right.
Okay, so the LDAC, are we on the LDAC yet?
No,
yet.
you need,
Not yet.
I don't know. Are we there?
We're kind of morphing into that, but, so maybe we should finish out this
Yeah.
report.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, anybody have any comments on what Mo has
Working on it.
reported, knowing that more will come?
I'm glad she's got it this far, really.
And I guess your name is on it, and my name will be on it, and it's sort of coming from us. So I guess we're trying to make sure that it is what we think we're doing.
You have seen it, so I can say that, yeah.
Yeah, I'll finish it out and get it to you guys before the next LDAC meeting on the 25th, so you can just see the finished figures and stuff. But I mean, I think you've got a lot of the meat of it.
We don't need to vote on it or anything.
I don't think so. I think, no, we were just,
That wasn't part of our mission, I don't think.
no, our mission was to review this with you and
I think
kind
that
of,
would be terribly, that'd be a mess to have all of the various boards review their individual reports and vote on them and,
yeah, no, I mean, I think just so that you're familiar with it and you know
Yeah.
what's going on in this area, is regarding district funds. And I mean, the concept is really, really sound. I mean, like, there's a group that has been designated to have oversight of these funds that are coming from the taxpayers, and they're just doing the best they can to make sure that the money's going to the libraries where it's supposed to go. So that's the concept. It's a little more than the state report. It's perfectly appropriate for our district, though. And I mean, unless you see some glaring thing that you just think is ridiculous to ask, or, you know, something that you think should be asked, or you're uncomfortable with something, you know, I mean, I think it's fine. As you said, Nick, maybe the idea of where the capital is asked or how it's asked or something, it may not even get them to really what they want to know. Because like our situation of the payment to the bond repayment would not be reflected in here. Per se. So, but
I mean, I think it's important that it does reflect, I mean, it's clear, you know, the majority of the funding that runs our library comes from this source.
That's right.
And they're trying to say that, are we doing the right stuff with those revenues?
That's right. I'm going back to that capital line versus the $400,000 payment. It's still, you're taking the $400,000 out of the money that is being allocated to the Oregon City Library service area. And it doesn't, the other part to me doesn't relate, because it's all related to the building of the building that was done. The $400,000 relates to what it's costing you on an annual basis, and those dollars are being allocated that way. So I don't know if you're required to report it that way, but it's going to be, I mean, if I were looking at the reports and I wanted to do comparative study of it, it's apples and oranges as soon as you put that information in there.
so, anyway, it is what it is.
What he said.
Okay, thank you. Anything else on the report? And now we're gonna move into the whole issues that have been happening around the Library District Advisory Committee,
Well,
LDAC,
yeah,
of which Don has been our
Yeah,
representative.
I'm just looking at the agenda here. There's also the review of the Oregon Library Association Public Library Standards.
No, that was just an attachment to.
Oh, that's just attachment, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're
That
in
was
the,
only
we're
just
in the
so
LDSC.
if we needed it as, you know, a support of the report.
Yeah, well, this is the little document that everybody voted on back in 2008, I think it was. And
Why don't you say what it is?
it is the, they went from big type to little type. This is the matter of the formation of the Library District of Clackamas County. This is the master order. And it goes on and on about a second hearing and all of this, and it gives the, outlines that, and then who voted for what. And then it talks about, you know, how things ought to be done, like the money that comes there ought to be for services, which means books and salaries and washing of windows and cleaning of toilets, I guess. And it didn't make any provision for building buildings, you know, or you could stretch and say maintaining buildings perhaps because you're washing windows, but basically anything bricks and mortar was not in there per se, except that there was, as I understand it, there's a line that says that you have to be able to serve your community, or words to that effect. And if you haven't got a facility that can serve your community, then you have to do something about that facility. Oak Grove is a good example up there, that poor little building up there, it's cranking away. And the whole issue about changing the master order to include capital expenditures for buildings comes from that struggle up there to get a library in Gladstone, a library to serve the unincorporated Oak Grove. There's another area up there too, I forget what it is. But it resulted in a lawsuit against the county, and the county, to resolve that lawsuit, then wants to build now 2 libraries. One, somehow help Gladstone build its library, but build another new one to replace the Oak Grove one someplace in that district like this, and that's just getting going. But it would be using district tax funds for that, and so that would have to mean amending the master order, and that's where the concerns are coming in, because the woman in Denise, I don't know.
Kathleen,
We
is that
got the letter here anyhow. Says, well, if you start spending money for bricks and mortar, then there's nothing for books, or there's going to be a terrible shift in things. And she may be right. I don't know. It's kind of uncharted territory. So I sit there and try to comprehend what's going on, but I've sat there for how many months? 8 months, 9 months, like this, and nothing has happened. Absolutely nothing has happened. And actually, at the last meeting, we finally had kind of a groundswell that wanted to shove some opinions, not a vote, but some opinions to the Board of the County Commissioners to perhaps amend the master order. So and they're the only ones that can do it. We can't do it. We can't vote on it.
Yeah, well, so let's back up just a little bit.
Sure.
So first of all, when we're talking about funding, I want you to realize that the county has already always put a lot of money from their general fund towards a lot of the libraries. And the creation of the district took that pressure off of the county general fund and put it on the district, right? But like Oregon City, for instance, never gave like a ton of money towards the Oregon City Library. So nothing has changed there. So that's one thing. And then I had another point. To back up on this whole master order thing. So first there's the master order, and it creates, it says what a district can do. That doesn't always mean what it will do, but what it can do. And then the intergovernmental agreement, the IGA, which has to be signed by 2/3 of the cities, that more specifically states what it will do. Back when this was created, there was an Estacada Library District that was all about just capital, because that's what they did to build their beautiful building that they have up there. At the time, the county attorney said we can't have two competing districts. We can't have two library districts doing the same thing. I think actually he may have changed his mind since then, but I'm not going to go there because we heard a lot of talk the other night. But anyway,
We did.
So because of that, they said, we are going to create a library district for all of Clackamas County that will be for operations. And that way we can include Estacada and not exclude Estacada, right? So that's why, according to the county attorney, it was just for operations. Now, perhaps because it was just for operations, they voted on a rate that I think is relatively low. And this will be a problem in the future, just so you know. It's 39 cents per thousand. And that's low compared to like the current districts that are being created these days are more like 60, 65 cents. If it was that high, we might not even be having this conversation because we could probably more easily cover the capital, right? But so that's how it got created and why in the beginning. It wasn't because people said, I only want my money going towards operations. It wasn't that. In fact, I'm very convinced that most people thought their money was just going to take care of everything. And they don't really understand the rate and how that pans out money-wise and stuff like that and what a library really needs, So that's what it was. And supposedly we were supposed to use it just for operations and services. Pan forward, I get here and I'm like, how am I supposed to build a new library with no money? I had the city attorney review these documents, and it was his opinion that there was enough vagueness in it that we could use it for indeed capital. And so what we ended up doing is we created a package of funding, as you guys know. Like, we moved into the Carnegie and started saving money because we couldn't spend that much money on that tiny of a building. So it had to go somewhere, so we put it in reserves. We got $1 million from the county, and then we went out and got a bond, which is a city, paid by the city, and it is not a revenue bond based on the district money. It is a general obligation bond backed by the, you know, the good taxpayers of Oregon City and the taxpayers of Oregon City alone. But we said to them, we intend to pay this bond off with money from the district. And also, we had some money coming from the city, you know? And when it was $200,000, that was about half of the repayment. So that passed with flying colors, which kind of tells me that at least the people in Oregon City are perfectly fine with their money going towards capital. So at least we have like that backing here. Now, according to the letter of the law and the county attorney, we pretty much have breached the IGA. They can kick us out of there, but there's no talk of that. Believe me, there's no like repercussions like landing on us. I'm just saying what we've done. And that the county basically wants to do exactly the same thing right now. Oak Grove, Oak Lodge, whatever they're called, they've been putting money in reserve because they haven't been able to spend it at their facility either. So they have a nice reserve, and they want to put that towards a new building. When they do ever get a bond thing figured out, they want to be able to pay it off with, and especially in Gladstone, with, you know, this district money. They want to do exactly what we've done here, and indeed, the county has done what we've done here before. So it's not like we're the only people either that have put money towards capital. Other libraries have put money towards capital. I was always wondering, like, sure, I can understand that's a city building now, but it's used by everybody, and where did they think the city was going to get that kind of money anyway, you know? And like paying off a $10 million bond as opposed to a $6 million bond is a lot less affordable, believe me. So, you know, it made sense here. We went ahead and did it. Now they want to do that for everybody. They want to say, you know, they want to be like legal, more or less. They want to change it so it's legal. And now we have a lot of people saying, but wait a minute, if you do that, if you divert money towards capital, you will not have enough money for operations. But, you know, again, like Don said, it comes back to if you don't have a facility, how can you provide services? How do you get to a facility? You know, so it's like complex, and, you know, there's like a bunch of people who don't care at all. There's some people who care very, very much. And then there's Oregon City who just.
And I think there's some people who are carrying a grudge from past fights.
Well,
Yeah, and that's,
those meetings are very tough because we have people who have very strong opinions who have been here for a very long time, and they dredge up all of those opinions
Yep.
from very long ago at each and every single meeting.
for
So-
example, the statistics from way back when we were, you know, only open 24 hours a week
Right,
or
which
something like
has
that.
nothing to do with the current district
But
whatsoever.
they dredge it up and hold it
Well,
on. yeah,
apparently,
so.
yeah, whatever,
Sorry,
that's okay,
I'll get off my soapbox.
yeah.
So the most recent meeting was yesterday.
So the most recent meeting was yesterday, and that was the county attorney reporting to the commissioners on the meeting that we had, was it just last week?
Yeah,
That was another LDAC meeting where all of us came. It was a special meeting, not a regular meeting, to just talk about that topic. And this is where Kathleen Drain, who wrote the letter that you have, and Jack Frick, who also wrote a letter, they were in the audience and spoke out very much against changing the master order. So the master order can be changed by the county commissioners, or they could decide to put it up for a vote. So what these guys are saying is, we think this is important enough, and it changes the context of what we voted on enough that it needs to be voted on again. And if you don't do that, then I'm gonna go get enough signatures so that it is voted on again. So that's kind of what a bunch of the discussion is going on. So the commissioners are kind of trying to decide, well, gee, how political is this really? What kind of bad hit are we gonna take? Well, I mean, I think people are gonna take a hit, one way or the other, you know?
So who owns the library building?
This one?
Yes.
The city,
Okay, so they could be charging rent,
but they're not.
right? But that's what I don't understand from the standpoint of, if you look at it as, I see that as operating. Because if you were renting from somebody else, it would be an operating expense, or
Well,
depreciation is an
right.
operating expense.
I would be paying rent, and I would be paying utilities and all that stuff that I already am paying. That is coming out of the operating fund.
Right, but it's still, it's conceptually the same thing.
Well, yeah, and like that contribution, that is a contribution, you know, of not doing something or not charging me for HR or not charging me for the city manager. That's not reflected anywhere in this report. What will be reflected are those cities that do charge for that. That's the only thing where we can really say, well, at least we don't have that, you
And
know.
that's the problem, the cities are not consistent in how they
Oh my gosh,
administer
no.
that. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a laissez-faire out there, so.
Well, and so the thing is that the district was, you know, formed with really great intentions and definitely gave a stable funding source as opposed to what it was before, right? And one of the other goals of the district was to balance out the haves from the have-nots. Well, the haves continued to give, and the have-nots stopped, you know, or didn't give more. So like Lake Oswego continued to always uphold what, right, fully, what they had always given. And so they supplemented, the district supplemented what the city of Lake Oswego gave the library. In Canby, the district supplanted whatever money Canby gave it. Like, you know, that ended its contribution, and in fact, we are now charging you. So, like, all the cities do it completely different, and we're somewhere in the middle. So, you know, that's the thing, is like, you and if you give like a lot of flexibility to what can be done with the money, unfortunately, there are those cities that will say, well, then, you know, that's your budget. You have to use it for everything. We're not giving you anything. You're the library director. You figure it out. That's when a lot of people are worried they're going to start looking at fewer hours, smaller collections, et cetera, all that. Fewer staff, you know, so that's the worry, and that's very legitimate. So when people are worried about what the money goes towards, you know, that is quite legitimate. And right now, the library directors are, you know, we're somewhere stuck in the middle. It's like, well, we are hired and fired by the city managers. So I certainly want to pick the times and I, you know, argue with Tony over things. And honestly, if my city doesn't have it to give, and I know all the people in the city who are putting the budget together, like, you know, I know what the reality is of the city as well. So, you know, we're in kind of a tough place. We're just, you know, kind of like, okay, tell us what we have, and we'll do the best with what we have.
I'm very glad, though, that they decided to move the librarians back to the table as opposed to having
Oh,
to sit
my
out,
goodness.
sit out in the audience someplace. So if they asked me a question and I didn't know, I'd have to get up and go and ask Maureen in the audience and then come back.
It was pretty ridiculous.
It was just like that old game of, you pass the message around
Well,
the
I'm
circle.
still afraid to even talk when I'm sitting at the table
You got
because it's like the you know, we were used to like kind of running those meetings, and the citizens who were there like thought it was great, you know, like your son-in-law. We all got along just fine, and then all of a sudden we were like relegated to the back 40, and I couldn't help Don at all.
Yeah.
So let me ask, do either of you think that the LDAC is going to be asked to make a recommendation on revising the master order?
Well,
and if
so
so,
no.
do you need input from us about how
So
you
here's
represent?
Here's the thing, they were not asked whether the county should revise the master order. The county already decided that it should revise the master order because that was an essential ingredient to the, you know,
Ending the lawsuit.
ending the litigation with Gladstone.
And one of the am I right? One of the county commissioners had his own plan that he was writing up on the board like
Yeah.
this, had 12 different steps
Well,
that you could go
so
through.
Commissioner Savas thought that if he could create some kind of sidebars that could get put in the master order about how the Capitol, how that whole thing happened, that maybe that would make people feel better. So it's like, you know, it has to be approved by LDAC, you have to have money in reserve, you know, before you can go out and spend this money on Capitol, you have to have this, and this. And I think it's a good intention, but it's not the document for it. Because the master order is supposed to be very vague. And so that felt inappropriate and also like way too detailed for us
But on the
to
other
like
hand-
decide on it.
The county commissioners can do whatever they like, and if they like his plan, all of a sudden it's in there, so.
Well, yeah, except that people can remonstrate, which
Yeah.
is what they will, and go out and try and get signatures, and then,
So fun times.
yeah, really fun times. So that's,
So is there, so I guess I'm trying to get a sense, is there a direction you need from us
Oh,
as representing us?
no, I just,
Or more, it's just so that we're all familiar with?
I just really want you guys to be familiar with what's going on, because it's very complex, and when things come out in the newspaper, like these letters, that you just kind of see out of the blue, you know, and probably don't know what to think about, or like what the next steps are. So this has all happened really, really quickly too, because if there is gonna be a remonstrance and a ballot measure and all that stuff, you know, the Gladstone, they have to approve things on their ballot measure in May, and so anything tied to it would hopefully happen in May.
and Robert's Rules of Order is a real stranger in that meeting.
Yeah, well, anyway, so that's why they're trying to get this decided on by the end of like January.
Yeah.
And there's another meeting on the 18th. And I guess, you know, I want you to be really well educated about this. Feel free to always like call me or write me and ask me any questions, because it's very confusing. But also like if there's, you know, if there's anything you see that just doesn't like feel right, or you have a particular preference, I mean, let us know.
But somebody, like my replacement, would be somebody who has a lot more experience in looking at numbers and how they relate to the world than I do. I'm not a numbers person at all. I'm a word person. So I'm hearing comments from the other end of the thing there that somebody knows a lot about this, and I'm saying,
So I guess just to wrap up, as the final part of this is that Don Woodluck has been
I'm out of my element there. You know, I have nothing to vote on. Nobody ever has anything to vote on. It's just
Yeah,
endless kind of
it is
talk.
kind of endless conversation.
But now we're getting to the place where the numbers are coming to roost, and people are going to be talking about the numbers and relating them to the real world. And I'm really fearful of that because I don't really understand them. So
Well, and, you know, and the reality of this is that no matter what the numbers are, there's really no recourse. You know, nobody's ever really going to go to a city manager and say, you can't do that with this money. Once it's in the city, it's the city's to decide what to do with. And they are spending it on the library. Even if it's allocated costs, you can make the argument that that's the library, you know? Especially if all the other departments in the city are doing the same thing. So it's really hard to get to unreasonable, like what's unreasonable. It's really hard to define that. And I don't think anybody wants to kick any cities out of the consortium, you know? So it's a very strange arrangement that works, and it's better than nothing, but it is still a very strange structure. And it's difficult at times. So whoever ends up being on that board needs to have a lot of tolerance for, you know, boomerang conversations, and yeah.
So is there anyone interested, willing to take this on?
after hearing all of that, I'd be a brave person indeed. Well, I have no problem doing the best I can with it. I'm just saying, if somebody else feels that they could make a better contribution, this would be the time. I don't shirk my duty. I'll keep on, you know, for the rest of my term here. But after that, look out, because then it's going to have to be somebody else. So.
I know it's hard with two new folks that this might feel like leaping
Well,
into a major event. I'm willing to consider for this year that I could take this on if you're feeling like you really want to be off. I mean, I respect.
Well, I think I've done all I can do. But like I say, I'm looking forward to all these discussions about millions and millions and millions of dollars spread over thousands and thousands and thousands of people in district after district after district like this. I suppose I can get my mind around it, but it isn't something I choose to do as a regular part of my life. So, you know, if somebody else is better with numbers, I know there's people out there like, yeah, give me the numbers, man. So, yeah, if there's somebody like that, I'm all for you.
I mean, from my perspective, if there's no impact on how much money we're getting, and I don't know how the master order and the IGA is set up, but if there's no impact on that, or I don't know how they readjust for population changes and allocations and things like that.
Oh, well, that's looked at. But I
we
mean,
only really-
there's a formula, and we
Right.
stick to the formula, and it uses those numbers with the population changes, and there's slight adjustments here and there. And it goes up annually because property values increase
Right.
and all that good stuff.
So I look at bottom line, I look at it and say, as long as it's not impacting what we're doing and we're going to get the same amount of money,
Yeah.
then I don't know if we really have, I mean, we can provide input, but I don't really see that it's not going to affect us.
Hopefully not. Hopefully not.
And when you say hopefully not, what could it?
Who knows?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just, like right now, because we're kind of the poster child for doing it the way we want to do it. And kind of the way the county wants to do it on the future. But nobody looks at us at these meetings and says, now Oregon City, you shouldn't have done that. Nobody does that.
Well,
And
not
so-
out loud.
Huh?
But not out loud, but
But even if they did,
Yeah.
it would be no big deal. And it, unless they're going to kick us out of the consortium, nothing else is going to change with
Right.
this.
Right. So I look at it, and even if what Oregon City did was not according to all the guidelines, I think you could make it right by how you do allocations and things like that. I mean, you could go through and change it so that it would be totally meeting the requirement of being an operating expense. It's just the way that it's being looked at right now.
Right. So anyway, we just try to stay out of trouble.
there you go.
We just sit through the meetings and stay out of
But the other service areas, what is their concern if they're going to get the same amount of money? I mean,
Well, their concern is if you were Lake Oswego and you were used to getting a certain amount of money and you put that all towards staff and collections and operating, strict operating, then all of a sudden, let's just pretend it got changed to now you could be expended on capital. And let's just pretend that your city manager said, well, Bill Bars, I want you to set aside $500,000 every year in reserves for capital for a future building. And Bill would be like, whoa, talk about impact on his current operations. That would be huge. So that's exactly what could happen. And that is a huge concern.
right. And I see that as a challenge of the way that it's set up, with the overarching library district, the service district in the pure sense, technically, and then we have the service areas, and they're, it's the control that if this were a service district, then you would have a board managing the library as a service district.
If this was a special district, you mean?
Yes.
Yeah.
And so that actually cleans up some of the things that we're talking about,
Well,
because then it's managed by that board.
Right. Well, it might, yeah.
It would not, you would be, well, most likely though, the city would then allocate more cost to it.
Right. But I mean, the point is that if this change goes into effect, there is a probability in some cities that the money that library directors have been expending on operations will be diverted to capital. Now, be that good or bad, that's not the point. The point is that all of a sudden there will be library directors out there with a lot more money, a lot less money to spend on what they're used to spending it on. That will have an impact on those libraries and what happens at that library. How do you make up for that? How do you make up for $500,000?
But I see the impact on us as being,
Well, the impact on
the
us
impact
is,
is collections, the collection that all of the individual libraries have.
Right.
And if they're not allocating if they're not allocating dollars to the collection,
Right.
then that impacts us.
Well, exactly.
That's the only area that I can.
well,
on
no,
this.
there's more to it than that. If there's fewer staff, maybe things get done differently, maybe things slow down. I mean, we work collectively in a lot more ways than people suspect, you know? We're a very
True.
tight group, you know, so I think there would be ways in which things would break down that we wouldn't see immediately. But, you know, they wouldn't be the same library. You know, and yeah, the collections is that area, and that's the point that the Sandy people were trying to make.
Right.
It's so, I
And
mean,
that's understandable.
It's very valid. So would we be impacted directly here? Probably not, but, you know, yeah, so I mean, it's a valid concern. Of the way, you know, because it's a change from the way things have been. Whether they should have been that way or not, that's how it was. So,
It would change us too if we get if in the future we got a different director, a different bunch of people in the city government, then we're in the same situation where they could tell us.
Could be.
yeah, definitely. It could be worse. Well, and I mean, you know, as things are never guaranteed to stay the same. As PERS increasingly makes it difficult for cities to meet their budgets and their demands, you know, I mean, we're all gonna have to be thinking about all that stuff.
So in
Well,
the,
I'm retiring.
that's right. So in the short term, so you said that they're hoping to come to a decision by the end of this month, right? Or
Yeah,
some, or
actually-
some resolution of something. I'm
Yeah,
not sure of what.
I think actually they have, their last board meeting of the month is on the 18th because of the way the meetings lined out. That's my understanding. And so I think the board's gonna decide, I think, on the 18th, what they're gonna do with this.
The Board of County Commissioners.
Yes,
Yeah,
that
and
board.
That board.
that's not just because they're having a meeting in January. There's something in the legal business of this lawsuit that's driving
I
the
see.
deadline too on this, so.
Well,
So
part
the
of
board,
it
the
is.
board is gonna make a decision
Yeah.
on the 18th, so next week
I
they're gonna make a
believe so.
decision.
I believe so.
You as the advisory board meet again that same day, or
No.
not again?
No, we just get to be in the room. We meet again on the 25th.
Okay.
They care about our opinion, but mostly they just want our feedback, not our vote for or
I
against.
see.
Yeah.
I see.
So we don't meet again until the 25th, and that's when we go over these reports. And I'm sure we'll get an update from the county manager as to the master order as well.
That's all we know.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's it. And there's another meeting.
Is there another
like,
meeting here?
yeah,
Okay, I
we need
wondered
to
about
get
that.
out of here.
So are you okay with staying on at least through this
Yeah.
month, and we can, when we
Like I say,
we'll
I'll-
revisit it
I
next
would.
month, kind of where things are at and whether.
I'll do the best I can.
Okay, thank you.
Oh my goodness.
I think that was, anything else? And then probably we should get out of here because there's another meeting.
Yeah, I know, poor Pete. I think we've given you all the communications we need to. And we've talked about future stuff.
Yeah, so we'll revisit some of this next month, probably at LDAC. So for the new folks, we don't normally go this long.
We really don't.
This is unusual, but been great discussion. Thank you all. Meeting is adjourned.